Oh, the rat. So it has a name. It had a name. You lie! Do I? The Ninja Turtles. So, the first Ninja Turtle movie was the greatest Ninja Turtle movie of all time. Okay, maybe I can't say all time because I don't know the future, but all the ones I've seen at least. And I'm going to explain exactly why. And this isn't merely a matter of, oh, it's the first one I watched, so I think it's the best. Certainly that's a type of thing that happens. I've explained it many times before, or I will probably explain it many times in the series of this YouTube show, but the first connection that you have to things seem like the original thing. So if you watch the first Spider-Man movie and Tobey Maguire was the first Spider-Man that you know, you'll think that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is the best Spider-Man. You'll think that his Spider-Man is ultimately what Spider-Man ought to be. But if you're a real Spider-Man fan, you'll know that that's not true. So certainly the same thing goes on with the Ninja Turtles. If you only had or first get in contact with the Ninja Turtles through the Secret Ooze movie, the second of the first original trilogy, you will think that that one is the best one. And if we liked something because that was our thing, we're gonna hold and cherish that thing as the best one no matter what. Doesn't matter which Ninja Turtle movie you had. It doesn't matter if your first connection to a certain thing was actually the worst version of that thing. If it was your connection to it as a child, you will love it off. But this, the first Ninja Turtle movie, was actually an outlier among the Ninja Turtle universe itself. Think about it. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle universe is actually really strange, and we knew it from the cartoon show. There was so much nonsensical stuff. It was clearly for children. The thing about the first one was that it was not just for children. This first movie, unlike the other ones, has a higher level of realism than the others. And this isn't merely a matter of my opinion. There's actual reasons behind why the realism was dropped in the following movies. We can clearly see by the ratings that it kind of goes downhill from the first movie. Now the reasons are predominantly complaints by the adults and, you know, the need to sell toys because money. Those are reasons that make a lot of sense, and those are reasons that many of us already know. But before I talk about comparing the first movie to the other ones, which I don't really want to do, I just want to focus on this one and talk to you about a couple of things that you don't expect as to why this movie was so great. This movie was way better than you expected then or you would expect now, especially because it's a Ninja Turtle movie. So this is my deeper analysis on some of those reasons. I hope some of you have seen, if only vaguely remember, or at least heard of the first Ninja Turtle movie. Cause I won't be doing a synopsis or anything like that. But other than that, just sit back and enjoy my analysis on why the first movie was deeper than you think. So part of the reason for that, because of the level of detailed explanation they tried to give into the world building of the story. For example, in terms of the sense of realism, they start off with a darker setting. Not only is it visually darker than the other ones, it also gives it a much more realistic sense of the violence and the crime that's going on by the Foot Clan in the city. You might not really get that kind of sense from the other films. How it is that it makes sense that they're freaking ninjas, the Foot Clan, in New York is all sort of dealt with in a much more serious tone. A movie that seems to be trying to take itself seriously. Unlike latter movies that are very clearly not trying to be serious. And that's okay, because kids don't need things to make sense. You can just have fun seeing wacky Ninja Turtles do wacky things, and definitely there was always a sense of wackiness even in this first movie. But the wackiness came from the Ninja Turtles themselves. It came from the teenagers. It didn't seem to be part of the narrative. It didn't go beyond the teenage turtles themselves. You didn't see the wackiness come from Tatsu and the Shredder. Anyway, this story demonstrates this level of seriousness right from the bat with the opening credits of April O'Neil talking about what's going on in the city, explaining that the city is being hit with a major crime wave, that there's major theft going on, but nobody seems to know why and how it's being done. Of course, because it's happening by ninjas, freaking ninjas, and the police and City Hall are unable to do anything about it, because how could the police handle actually capturing real freaking ninjas? They can't. But April O'Neil, doing her expose, is trying to come down then on City Hall for their inaction to stop or even address what's really going on with this crime wave. And this movie actually went to the care to kind of explain this relationship about how April O'Neil is exposing City Hall for inaction to push the police department not to even admit that this is a crime wave done by ninjas, and the police's inability to do anything about these ninjas, and then the police trying to come down on April O'Neil's boss, Charles, to stop her, to muzzle her, to censor her from criticizing City Hall. And how did he do that? Because Charles' son, Danny, is caught as a thief himself, because Danny was being indoctrinated into the foot. So Chief Police Stern, in a kind of politically corrupt move, was willing to make a deal with Charles to release his son Danny if Charles could silence April O'Neil. But Charles couldn't silence her, and Chief Stern literally calls him up and said, "We had a deal." So think about it, this first movie took itself serious enough to even try to explain the social political ramifications of having these ninjas that cannot be detected by the police, causing a major crime wave in New York. And what would happen? The inaction of the police, the criticism that would come down on the politicians, the police corruption that would try to lead to silencing news reporters and journalists. They actually mentioned to talk about this in a Ninja Turtle movie? Dude, I thought this was for kids. No, it's actually made for everyone, and everyone includes adults. You see, this first movie tried to make itself sensible to everyone, and that includes adults. Now, of course, they can't exactly explain giant freaking turtles, and they didn't do much of an explanation to why mutated turtles would end up being bipedal and walking and talking like human beings specifically. But they still did a very good job explaining a number of other things you would never expect from a Ninja Turtle movie. Things you would not expect from a children's movie. Things that clearly show that this was not a children's movie. And when I say this, I specifically think of their treatment of the Foot Clan. I would have never expected, and face it, neither did any of us, expect this movie to really explain the process of indoctrination. Because when we do think about why the heck are there freaking ninjas in New York, this movie went to explain how this cult leader, Oroku Saki, came to New York, an American city, and started a cult following, brainwashing these disaffected youth by providing them a level of freedom that they don't get from their own homes, and a sense of community, really a sense of family. Yeah. I don't know what that was. This concept of family is integral to watching this movie. They use it and analyze it so well, both in terms of the foot and in terms of the turtles. And while we get it often in other movies later on, the relationship of the turtles in terms of their family because they're brothers, we don't really often get such a deep connection to understanding that behind what makes a Foot Clan member. And we got it with Danny. As an adult, we might appreciate the brainwashing process done by this cult leader, Oroku Saki, to create a sense of family and a sense of detachment to the rest of society for his new followers, these young New Yorker kids who didn't have that same sense of family, and certainly weren't being given the same sense of freedom from their own families. I remember very clearly when we first see the great cult leader. Now I know when we're kids, we already know this is the Shredder. Oh my God, it's Shredder. But think about it. He's a freaking cult leader. He's presented as this revered, mystical sage almost. Very powerful though, a warrior sage. So the Shredder, right, when he's first introduced, he comes from the shadow. And in fact, every time anyone is introduced who's really important, like the Ninja Turtles, even Splinter, it never just starts off with them just being right there in the sunlight and the light, like, hey, look at me, I'm wacky-doo. No, it's always presented from a darkness. It's always presented from a different perspective, not showing their face first. This really does convey that each of these are actually ninja, or important characters, with some level of mysteriousness to them. As Master Splinter, the master of the Ninja Turtles, their father figure, says to them, our domain is the shadows. So when the Shredder comes in and he's first introduced with this great reverence as if he is this great holy leader, warrior leader, they show how he indoctrinates this new member to be a full-fledged Foot Clan and wear the Dragon Doji. He says to him, you make us all proud. Think about that, and think about the following lines he delivers. You may not remember this, but it stuck out for me. And they pan around his face. This is your family. I am your father. It's powerful stuff, man. We all get it because we've seen brainwashing happen in the real world. And we know what happens in these cults. How they detach you from the rest of society and try to tell you that you belong to us only. The rest of the world, they won't understand. I understand. I'm your family. They actually managed to show this in the first Ninja Turtle movie. How serious is this movie taking itself to try and explain how this cult leader from Japan is brainwashing American youth to join his cult using the concept of family and acting as if he is their father. This is not something I would have ever expected from a Ninja Turtle movie for kids. I didn't kind of have any of that sense from any kind of cartoon or anything, that this is how the brainwashings happen. All these Foot Clan were like the putties to me. They were just nameless nobodies before. But now, with Danny and seeing this operation, they were all given lives. They were given a sort of role in this story about how the economy of the Foot Clan is happening. Where are they getting the recruits? How are they funding themselves through all the theft? And how is any of this happening through secrecy? Because the bond of family is powerful enough that if you lack it in your own household, somebody who wants to manipulate you, a cult leader, a brainwasher, can use these concepts to indoctrinate you into their philosophies. They will tell you, I am your father. And while other Ninja Turtle movies do make use of this family concept, because of course they are brothers, in this first movie, it's much more deeper and emotional. Not only the concept of family for the Foot, but the concept of family for the Turtles. For I did not expect to see the amount of rage in Raphael when they show the panning of Raphael screaming as he realizes his father is missing. It's really impactful. Of course, it may have been a limitation due to the technology of the time, probably literally somebody walking around with the camera, but that shakiness really demonstrated an explosive anger of Raphael's that they addressed. Right in the beginning, Master Splinter, his father, is saying to him, I failed to stop your anger, and all I hope is that one day when you go off, you don't forget me and your brothers. And you see Raphael cry. That's not the only time. You see the guilt in Leonardo sitting by his brother, thinking that his inaction, his encouragement, telling his brother, yeah, go off, who needs you? As the last thing he said to Raphael before he went off and got beat up on the rooftops and almost killed. And he's sitting there waiting for his brother to come back. You can feel his sense of guilt. More importantly is this scene when they're gathered around the fire, trying to connect to their father, who they don't even know technically is alive at this point. How they come to tears when is revealed the final message of their father, that their power doesn't come from pizza. It comes from family. Turtles brought to tears and sadness and tragedy. I didn't expect to really see this, and I bet a lot of you forgot about it. This movie tried to treat turtles as if they were real persons, not just wacky, weird teenager hijinks stuff. Now, there are a lot of other funny things that I didn't really get as a kid, but like I said, it doesn't really matter. Things don't need to make sense to a kid, and they never really did. But if you're an adult now and you watch this show when you were a kid and you had kids now, you know kids can watch the same movie freaking 50 times straight, one day after another, every single day for an entire summer vacation. You know that kids can do that. They can watch Frozen a billion jillion times, or whichever movie, for an entire summer, or maybe multiple entire summers. Heck, I watched this movie as well as the Batman movie, even The Sound of Music, even The Wizard of Oz, and many of the Disney movies. I've watched these movies so many times that I've memorized lines from them. And that's a great thing when you memorize lines from a movie that isn't just meant for kids. For if children can memorize lines from a movie that was meant for adults as well, they will be able to reflect on these lines much later in life, not because they actually rewatched that movie I don't have to rewatch the Ninja Turtle movie to reflect on some of the lines and how they made sense much later in life when I was able to be mature enough to know what was really sort of going on. And I want to bring attention to this one scene when Raphael first meets Casey Jones in the beginning of the movie. You see, Casey Jones is beating up these potential thieves, and Raphael, who just stopped these thieves from thieving, comes in and stops him. I didn't really understand this conflict. As a kid, we're much more dichotomous. We kind of more think of people are good or people are bad. Right from the beginning of this movie, they're presenting two good characters that I'm supposed to know are good, but they're fighting each other. And I didn't really understand why. I chalked it up to the idea that Casey Jones was just really intolerant and scared of this monster. But the reality is, they differed on an ethical issue, a moral quandary. You see, Casey Jones wanted to beat up these guys, to punish them. Casey Jones is literally trying to beat up these teenage would-be thieves with actual hockey sticks as punishment, saying they need to be taught a lesson. And in response, Raphael says, "Not like that, they don't. Not from you." I couldn't understand that as a kid. I didn't really understand the conflict that's going on here, but now as an adult, it's kind of interesting. Raphael does not agree with this kind of vigilantism that Casey Jones represents, to punish and make these criminals pay, suffer greatly. In a sense, Raphael wouldn't be down with the Punisher. And that's a deeper thing than even the superficial stuff that I didn't understand in terms of language. But like I said, that's why this movie wasn't just meant for kids. It was clearly meant to be sensible and somewhat realistic even to adults. And the beauty of that, as I was saying, is that some of the lines are crafted so beautifully well. And the great line that comes out and sticks to my head is the line we hear when Shredder, Oroku Saki, killer of Yamato Yoshi, Splinter's master, says, upon hearing the turtles mention Splinter's name, "Oh, the rat, so it has a name. It had a name." The change from has to had is not a great impact to a child as it might be to an adult who understands the English language well enough to understand what's going on with these simple words. It reminds me much of how the Spartans used language. In my studies of studying ancient Greco-Roman culture and their mythologies, maybe it was in philosophy. Anyway, the Spartans would always prefer to use less words rather than more. They felt the less words you can use to convey something indicates its truthfulness, its impact. And it seems in writing that is kind of true. So when the Shredder goes from it has to had, from present to past, it indicates to us death and murder. This enrages Leonardo. And of course, it becomes impactful from the subtlety in the change in language. Something that I could only truly appreciate as an adult, reflecting on these lines, not because I rewatched this movie, but because I had these lines memorized in my mind from being a child and repeating this movie 100 billion bajillion dillion times and just memorizing them. So as many people know, the movie quality dropped from the first to the later ones. The realism was removed. And this isn't my own personal bias because I love the first one. It's a documented thing. It happened because of complaints of adults seeing too much violence, and it happened from the need to sell toys because money. People care about money. They don't care about like an art created standalone, independent, sensible film. Things don't need to make sense. They need to make money. That's the only thing that matters now, right? Michael Bay. Anyway, as an adult, I can't watch those other movies as if in any sort of sensible fashion. It's as if, and it clearly is, that the show creators know that this is not supposed to make sense. It's just supposed to be fun, wacky, wild stuff for kids. But not in the first movie. The first movie was like, let's see how realistic this possibly could be. Now they can't explain giant freaking turtles walking around bipedal like I said, but they do try to explain a number of things that you wouldn't have expected from a Ninja Turtle movie. you wouldn't have expected this deep connection to the brainwashing using the concept of family, the social-political things that are going on with the police corruption and the politics wanting to silence journalists. You didn't expect that from a Ninja Turtle movie. Comparing that to what happened after this, it went straight downhill. That first scene in the second movie of The Secret Ooze, it was a clear marker and is actually well known in the movie community, you can say, for being so outlandishly nonsensical. It was a clear message from the show creators that they learned from and will respect the buyers of their toys, the mothers of the children who watch their movies, that this is too violent and too dark. So when you first see the turtles in the second movie, they're literally just walking downstairs in the bright light like, hey, look at us. And they're actually doing such nonsensical fighting right off the bat to demonstrate to the audience that this is not the same turtles, that we're wacky. In conclusion, the first Ninja Turtle movie was the greatest Ninja Turtle movie out of the trilogy, and as far as I know, the other ones. Now, I didn't watch all the other ones, but I still hold by my opinion that this first movie was way deeper than you probably ever expected. And if you're ever gonna rewatch a Ninja Turtle movie, I hope you do this first one and really see how deep it really is. Hey friends, I hope you like my analysis today, sort of. Take us back on this time loop. I know we're all adults now, maybe we had kids, or maybe you just were a part of a generation where you didn't really watch this movie as a kid. That's fine. And I gotta say one more thing. I watched this CinemaSins thing about everything wrong with the first movie, and they're full of shit. They're full of garbage. They make up a lot of stuff. They're absolutely wrong. They're just so garbage, I want to completely destroy them. So if I even see 2 comments saying, let's get them, or even 1 comment with 2 people liking it, let's get them, I will make a full video completely destroying all of their BS points. They have no idea what they're talking about. And I've seen a lot of other people criticize them for other movies, but I think I could do it with this one. This movie is far better than the CinemaSins could have ever expected, because a lot of times it seems like they didn't even watch the movie. They make up so much garbage. They're full of crap. Jeez. I mean, I do love this movie, so somebody might say I'm biased, but you don't gotta actually watch this movie. I'll actually watch this movie and I will destroy every single point they have. Almost. Again, if you wanna see me do that, all I wanna see is 2 comments saying, let's get him, or 1 comment with 2 lights saying, let's get him. And if I see those comments, or whatever, of let's get him, I'm gonna destroy the crap out of CinemaSins for messing with the Ninja Turtles. This first movie is a work of art. And I'm not saying it's the greatest movie of all time, and it's absolute genius. I think my appreciation of it probably only comes in terms of comparison to the other Ninja Turtle movies, or other movies that are meant for children. This thing is way deeper than you would have expected for a child. It's true then, it's true now. Watch it if you want to. If not, I'll rewatch it and simply destroy CinemaSins for you. And you might enjoy watching me do that, because those guys.